picture the scene. It's Mexico City, the Day of the Dead.
Oh, right, with the massive street parades?
Exactly. Thousands of people are just flooding the streets. You've got these towering skeleton floats, vibrant marigolds covering literally every surface, and, dancers in that elaborate skull makeup moving to the rhythm of these massive
It's
drums.
gorgeous. It feels like this ancient, sacred tradition that's been celebrated in the exact same way for centuries.
Right. And here's a really wild part. That specific parade, it is not an ancient tradition at all.
Wait, really?
No, it was completely invented for the James Bond movie, Spectre.
You're kidding. The whole thing was just for a movie.
Yep. The filmmakers wanted this epic opening shot, and the Mexican government basically offered them a massive financial incentive, like a targeted tax break to shoot there.
Okay, but there had to be a catch, right?
There was. The condition was that they had to heavily feature the modern city skyline to boost tourism. So the filmmakers agreed. They manufactured this massive traditional-looking parade for the scene, and it looked so incredible on film that Mexico City just decided to adopt it in real life.
That is wild. It's a perfect example of how, invisible financial rules literally shape our physical reality.
Yeah.
I mean, the entire aesthetic of a major cultural event was essentially engineered by a municipal tax incentive.
It totally was, and it goes way beyond city parades, too. I mean, think about the dogs we keep in our homes.
Wait, dogs. How do taxes relate to dogs?
So the Doberman Pinscher, it only exists today because of a 19th century German tax collector named Louis Doberman.
Oh, wow. I never knew that was a guy's name.
Yeah. He had this deeply unpopular job of carrying large amounts of cash through some incredibly rough, high-crime neighborhoods. And, he needed a fiercely loyal, intimidating companion to protect him from getting robbed on his route.
Which makes sense, considering everyone probably hated him.
Exactly. So he spent years selectively breeding various local dogs, Rottweilers, German Pinschers, Greyhounds, until he created the ultimate purpose-built bodyguard. The Doberman was literally born out of the necessity of tax collection.
That is just crazy to think about.
Welcome to the Missing Lessons, where we explain what school never did.
If you're enjoying the Missing Lessons, make sure to follow the podcast, leave a rating, and share it with someone who might find it interesting. It helps us create more episodes and reach more curious minds.
So most of us look at taxes as just this boring, frustrating deduction on our payslips. We see the gross number, we see the net number, we sigh, and we just move on.
Right, it's just a bill you have to pay.
Exactly. But today, we are doing a deep dive to figure out how these invisible rules actually run the world. Because tax is the hidden architecture of our entire society.
It shapes our culture, the genetic makeup of our pets, apparently.
Yeah, the literal layout of our homes and the fundamental value of the money in our pockets. Today, we are cracking open the hood of civilization to see how the engine actually works.
I love that. So where do we even start with something this massive?
Well, let's start with the most fundamental question of all. It's a question almost everyone has asked at some point, usually when they're a kid trying to understand the adult world, right?
Okay.
If the government owns the money factory, why do they need to tax us to pay for things? Why can't they just print the currency they need to build schools, pave roads, and fund hospitals?
I mean, honestly, that childhood logic makes total sense on the surface. If you literally have a printing press in your basement, you shouldn't need to ask your citizens for a cut of their paycheck.
Right. But that assumes taxation exists strictly to fund government operations, and the reality is far more structural. We have to look at the actual mechanics of fiat currency.
So let's unpack that for everyone. Because the government doesn't actually need your specific physical dollar bills to pay its bills.
Not at all. Think of a national currency like shares in a massive corporation. If a company wants to raise money, they can issue new shares.
But if they just keep printing millions of new shares and flooding the market, the value of every existing share just plummets.
Exactly. That is inflation. To protect the value of the stock, a smart company will do a stock buyback. They pull shares out of circulation and destroy them, making the remaining shares more valuable.
Okay, so how does that relate to my taxes?
Taxation works on the exact same mechanical principle. When a government spends money, they are effectively issuing new shares into the economy. When they collect taxes, they are performing a massive economy-wide stock buyback.
Oh, wow. So they're legally pulling that money back out of circulation to prevent catastrophic stock dilution.
Precisely. So taxes are the ultimate tool for inflation control. They act as the drain in the economy, ensuring that when the government turns on the faucet of spending, The whole system doesn't just overflow and render the currency worthless.
That makes so much sense when you put it like that.
Right, but the concept goes even deeper than just controlling the volume of money. Taxes actually give the currency its baseline value in the first place.
This is the part that usually bends people's minds a bit. Because a piece of paper with a politician's face on it, or a digital 1 and 0 sitting on a bank server, it has zero inherent worth.
None. You cannot eat a $20 bill. You can't build a shelter out of a 10-pound note.
Wait, so you're telling me my money only has value because the government essentially creates a mandatory demand for it at the end of the year?
Yes, exactly. The only reason any of us agree to trade hours of our labor for these meaningless pieces of paper is because of the coercive power of the state. The government strictly demands that you pay your annual tax burden using their specific currency.
Right, because if they didn't mandate that, there would be no universal demand for the money. Without taxes, a national currency would just be an optional piece of paper.
Exactly. If the government suddenly said, hey, we no longer collect taxes, you can use whatever you want, the national currency would immediately collapse. We might just go back to bartering chickens for haircuts or, trading in silver bars.
So the mandatory nature of the tax bill creates this artificial baseline demand that forces every single citizen to value the fiat currency.
It anchors the entire system. And once you have that anchor, the government can start using the tax code to steer society. They can tackle inequality by redistributing wealth, and they can pool resources to fund massive public goods.
Right, things like national defense or scientific research, which no single citizen could afford to build independently.
Exactly. And they also use it to correct market failures. It acts as a behavioral steering wheel.
How so?
Well, by placing heavy taxes on things that damage society, like carbon emissions or tobacco, they artificially raise the price to discourage use. Conversely, they offer targeted tax breaks to subsidize behaviors they want to see more of, like investing in renewable energy or, higher education.
Makes sense. But I think the most profound sociological effect of taxation is the social contract itself. When citizens are forced to hand over a significant portion of their labor to a central authority, they suddenly care very deeply about how that authority operates.
Yeah, I'd actually argue that's the primary driver of modern democracy. I mean, if a king relies entirely on gold mines he owns, he doesn't care what the peasants think.
Right, because he doesn't need their money.
Exactly. But the moment a government relies on the taxation of a broad middle class, those citizens demand a voice. They demand transparency, they vote, they protest, and they hold leaders accountable because it is literally their money on the line.
Yeah, the mechanism of extraction is what binds us to the state. But, understanding the philosophy of why this system exists is vastly different from understanding how it practically operates on your paycheck.
Oh, totally.
And this is where we run into a massive, persistent misunderstanding among the general public regarding progressive tax brackets.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard someone say they turned down a promotion or refused to work extra hours because it would put them in a higher tax bracket and they'd lose money?
Oh man, all the time. It is the great tax bracket myth. I hear this constantly from young professionals entering the workforce.
Yeah. It's so common. People genuinely believe that crossing an income threshold means their entire salary gets taxed at the new, higher rate, leaving them with a smaller net paycheck than before.
Which is mathematically impossible under a progressive system. A progressive tax bracket does not apply a flat penalty to your total income. It operates on a marginal basis.
So explain how that actually works for the listener.
Sure. Think of the brackets as a staircase. Let's say you make $100,000, and the top bracket for that income level is 22%. You do not hand over $22,000.
Right, because you're moving up the steps.
Exactly. You pay 0% on the first step of the staircase. Maybe you pay 12% on the chunk of money sitting on the second step. The 22% rate only applies to the specific new dollars that cross the threshold onto the top step.
So your old money stays safely taxed at the lower rates.
Yes. You will never, ever take home less money by earning more. You are only heavily taxed on the new money that crosses the threshold.
That is such an important takeaway. You never lose money by getting a raise.
Exactly. And beyond income tax, there are all these other taxes you encounter daily without even thinking about it, like value-added tax or sales tax.
Right, like when you're buying a chocolate bar.
Yeah, say you buy a chocolate bar for £1.20. 20 pence of that is automatically sent to the government by the shop. You never even see it happen. And then, of course, there's capital gains tax, which is a whole other beast.
Well, and for anyone paying attention to modern wealth structuring, arguing over marginal income brackets is kind of missing the forest for the trees entirely.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, the progressive income tax system was originally designed to prevent the formation of massive, entrenched aristocracies.
Mm.
But the people at the very top of the wealth ladder today aren't interacting with income tax brackets at all.
Because the ultra wealthy don't make their money from a traditional salary. They make it from assets, real estate, company stock, fine art. And the system operates on a fundamentally different rule book for assets.
Right, because if you earn a dollar by physically working in an office, you pay income tax, which can climb upwards of 37 or 40% depending on where you live.
But if you earn a dollar because an asset you own went up in value, you pay capital gains tax when you sell it. And historically, the capital gains rate is often structured at roughly half the rate of standard income tax.
The justification usually given for this disparity is that lower capital gains rates incentivize long-term investment and economic growth. But it creates this stark reality where money made from simply owning things is taxed far more favorably than money made from human labor.
It's wild. And the wealthiest individuals have found ways to bypass even the capital gains tax using a strategy commonly referred to in financial circles as buy, borrow, die.
Oh, I've heard of this. This is where the mechanics get incredibly fascinating. Walk us through it.
Okay, so imagine you are a founder and you hold $100 million in company stock. If you sell that stock to buy a mansion, you trigger a massive capital gains tax event.
Right, which you don't want to do.
Exactly. But if you take a massive salary from your company to buy the mansion, you trigger the highest income tax bracket. So you do neither.
Instead, you go to a major bank.
Right. You offer your $100 million in stock as collateral, and the bank issues you a $10 million line of credit at a very low interest rate, say 2 or 3%.
Because under the tax code, a loan is not considered income. It is borrowed money. Therefore, it is entirely tax-free.
Exactly. You use the $10 million loan to buy your mansion and fund your lifestyle. Meanwhile, your $100 million in stock is still invested, and let's say it grows at 7 or 8% a year.
So the growth of your assets completely outpaces the low interest rate on your loan.
By a mile. You never sell the stock, so you never pay capital gains. You just keep borrowing against it, living completely tax-free until the day you die.
And then what happens upon death?
Well, a mechanism called the step up in basis essentially resets the taxable value of those assets for your heirs, totally erasing the unrealized capital gains. Your state pays off the original loan, and the wealth transfers having legally bypassed the entire progressive income tax system we just talked about.
It is an absolute masterclass in exploiting the rules of the game.
It really is. And, this kind of behavior isn't new. Because taxes directly impact our wallets and no human being naturally wants to part with their resources, human history is basically a long, hilarious story of citizens and corporations desperately searching for loopholes.
Yeah, when a central authority creates a proxy to measure wealth, the population immediately alters their behavior to hide that proxy.
A perfect historical example of this is the English window tax of 1696.
Oh, I love this one.
So good. So the government needed revenue, but assessing everyone's exact income was impossible back then. They needed a visible proxy for wealth, and the logic seemed sound. Rich people have larger houses have more windows, so taxing a building based on the number of windows is a fair way to tax the wealthy.
But they severely underestimated human ingenuity, didn't they? And just the sheer desire to avoid a bill.
They really did. Property owners literally started bricking up their windows to drop their tax assessment.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, entire streets in London featured houses with these dark, fake, bricked-in rectangles where glass used to be. Landlords sealed up the windows of tenement buildings, forcing their poorest tenants to live in absolute darkness with ruined ventilation.
That's awful.
It was. It became such a notorious, miserable policy that it actually gave birth to the phrase daylight robbery, because you were literally being robbed of your natural daylight by the taxman.
That is fascinating. Or consider Russia in the late 1600s. Peter the Great returned from a tour of Europe and decided his society looked too rustic. He wanted a modern, clean-shaven European aesthetic, so he instituted a beard tax.
A beard tax. And it wasn't just a fine, right? It was a highly bureaucratic process.
Yeah. If a man absolutely refused to shave his facial hair, he had to pay a heavy recurring tax.
And to prove he had paid it, he was required to carry around a specific copper token everywhere he went. One side of the token featured a crude carving of a nose, lips, and a massive beard.
And what did the other side say?
The other side carried an inscription that translated to, "The beard is a useless burden." And if you were caught on the street with a beard and no copper token, the authorities would pin you down and forcibly shave you on the spot.
Oh my God. It's exactly like a real-world video game. The government programs the rules, and citizens and corporations are just speedrunners trying to find the glitches in the code.
That is the perfect analogy, and if everyday citizens are the speedrunners, modern multinational corporations are the hackers rewriting the source code. Let's look at how this plays out in the grocery aisle.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
So, in the United Kingdom, essential food items are generally exempt from value-added tax. You don't pay tax on a bag of raw potatoes, for instance, but luxury snacks, specifically potato chips or crisps as they call them there, are heavily taxed. So Procter & Gamble, the massive conglomerate behind Pringles, took the government to court.
Wait, they sued the government over potato chips?
They did. They realized that if they could legally redefine the physical nature of their product, they could save millions in tax liabilities. So they went to battle, arguing that Pringles, legally speaking, are not potato crisps at all.
How on earth do you argue a Pringle isn't a potato chip?
Well, their lawyers pointed to the artificial uniform shape of the snack. They pointed to the unnatural tube packaging. But crucially, they brought in the ingredient list to prove that a Pringle is actually only 42% potato.
Wait, really? What's the rest of it?
The majority of the product is wheat starch, corn flour, and rice flour. They argued to a judge that a Pringle is actually closer to a biscuit or a baked cake than a potato crisp.
Did that actually work?
Initially, yes. The tribunal agreed with them. They successfully avoided the snack tax by legally proving their famous potato snack was barely a potato.
That is hilarious.
Now, the ruling was eventually overturned by a higher court of appeals, but the lengths to which companies will go to exploit definitions is just astounding. And that wasn't even the most dramatic culinary tax trial in British history.
Oh, not even close. The greatest tax loophole battle of all time absolutely belongs to the Jaffa Cake.
Yes. For those unfamiliar, a Jaffa Cake is a small, round, spongy treat with a layer of orange jelly completely coated in chocolate. It is massively popular.
But under the complex VAT rules we just mentioned, chocolate-covered biscuits are considered a luxury indulgence and are taxed at the full rate. But chocolate-covered cakes are considered a staple baked good.
Right. So the manufacturer, McVitie's, had always classified them as cakes, enjoying the 0% tax rate. But the tax authority finally stepped in and argued the obvious reality. They said, look, these are the exact size of a biscuit. They are packaged like biscuits. They are sold in the biscuit aisle. You eat them with your fingers at tea time like a biscuit. You need to pay the luxury tax.
It was just totally fair. But the financial implications were massive. So McVitie's took the tax authority to a formal tribunal, and they didn't just bring lawyers, they brought theater.
Oh, it was a total spectacle. The legal team literally baked a giant Jaffa cake, the size of a multi-tiered wedding cake, and wheeled it into the courtroom.
Just to physically demonstrate to the tribunal that it was baked using a traditional cake sponge batter, not a hard biscuit dough.
Exactly. But the visual aid wasn't enough. The absolute winning argument came down to the molecular chemistry of baked goods.
The chemistry?
Yes. The lawyers brought in food scientists to explain the mechanics of staleness. They demonstrated that when a traditional biscuit goes stale, it absorbs moisture from the air and goes soft and soggy. But when a traditional cake goes stale, moisture migrates out of the sponge and the cake goes hard and brittle.
Oh, I see where this is going.
The legal team left a plate of Jaffa Cakes out to go completely stale. They presented them to the tribunal, proved that they had gone hard rather than soft, and won the case entirely on the chemistry of moisture migration. The Jaffa Cake was legally enshrined as a cake. 0% tax. Millions of dollars saved indefinitely.
It's incredible. But it raises a critical macroeconomic question, right? If everyone, from a homeowner breaking up their windows to a corporate lawyer baking giant courtroom cakes, is constantly searching for loopholes, what happens when a government makes the video game too hard to play?
That is the big question.
Like, what happens when the tax code becomes so punitive or the paperwork so impossibly labyrinthine that the speedrunners just give up?
This is the ultimate tightrope walk for any state authority, getting the balance right between societal funding and economic friction. Because if you push too hard, people don't just write angry letters to their representatives. They opt out of the formal economy entirely.
Meaning they just operate under the table.
Exactly. Smaller businesses simply pack up and move to the informal sector. They strip off the legal labels, operate strictly in untraceable cash, and hide in the shadows.
Which is a catastrophic failure for a society. It severely drains the government of essential operating revenue, and it leaves millions of workers trapped in an underground economy with absolutely zero legal protections, labor rights, or safety nets.
Right. But you can't solve an informal economy with brute force. You can't just arrest every single street vendor or cash-only contractor. You have to change the code of the game to coax them back into the light.
Are there any good examples of a government actually pulling that off?
Yeah, a brilliant real-world example of this occurred in Brazil. For decades, Brazil struggled with a massive, entrenched shadow economy because their tax code was famously complex and highly punitive to small operators. So the government introduced a radical program called Simples National.
Simples, meaning simple.
Exactly, the concept was right in the name, simplicity. They dramatically lowered the overall tax rate for micro and small businesses, and they consolidated several different complicated regional and federal taxes into one single, easy-to-understand monthly payment. They completely slashed the bureaucratic friction.
But the math behind the result is deeply counterintuitive for most people, right? Because if a government significantly lowers its tax rate, you would naturally assume the government collects less money.
That is the great paradox. Overall tax revenue for the government actually increased by over 7%.
Wow. Wait, really?
Yeah. Because the system was finally easy to navigate and the rate felt mathematically fair to a small operator, hundreds of thousands of businesses that had spent years hiding in the informal sector voluntarily stepped forward. They registered legally and started paying into the system.
So sometimes the best way for a government to make more money is actually to lower the tax rate and simplify the paperwork.
Precisely. The government collected a much smaller percentage, but they were collecting it from a vastly larger pool of active businesses. Sometimes the most profitable action a tax authority can take is to simply lower the barrier to entry.
It's all about incentives. Whether you are lowering rates to bring businesses out of the shadows or, allowing billionaires to borrow against their stock portfolios to avoid capital gains, the tax code is just a massive board game of behavioral incentives.
Which brings us to a question for you listening. Think about the power of these invisible rules.
Yeah, here's a question for you. If you could create one weird tax today, like the historical window tax or the beard tax, what would you tax to change people's everyday behavior? Let us know your thoughts in the comments.
It's a fascinating thought experiment because ultimately that is the core reality of taxation. It is not just an annoying bill that takes deductions from your hard work. It is the ultimate administrative tool for organizing human civilization.
It really is.
It is the drain that controls inflation and prevents our currency from overflowing into worthlessness. It is the absolute mandatory anchor that gives our pieces of paper their power in the market. It dictates the architectural layout of historic cities, the breeding of guard dogs, and whether a multinational corporation officially classifies its snacks as a cake or a biscuit.
And we've all heard the famous quote about the sheer inevitability of all this invisible machinery. In this world, nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes.
Right. And everyone universally attributes that quote to Benjamin Franklin. It's written in a famous letter he sent to a friend in 1789. And here's one final mind-blowing historical reality to leave you with.
Benjamin Franklin didn't actually invent that phrase.
You didn't?
No. He was just repeating a well-known pop culture reference of his day. That quote actually appeared decades earlier in an English stage play from 1716 called The Cobbler of Preston.
No way!
Yeah. And the character who originally spoke the most famous, enduring phrase in the history of global economics. It was a character named Toby Guzzo, who happened to be a drunken, rambling cobbler.
That is amazing. But, as we look toward the future, the certainty of Toby Guzzo's quote is actually facing its first real technological challenge.
Oh, with digital assets.
Exactly. As we move deeper into an era of decentralized cryptocurrencies networks where a central government cannot easily mandate a tax drain or force a buyback, we have to ask a really profound question. How will governments maintain the mandatory value of their fiat currency tomorrow if they lose the ability to tax it today? That is something to think about. Next time you look at the net pay on your payslip, or buy a bag of potato crisps, or notice a bricked-up window on an old city street, remember old Toby Guzzo, the system might be complex, and the loopholes might be absurd, but the mechanics of how it shapes our reality are far from boring. Also, be sure to drop a like and a comment on the video if you want to keep exploring these topics with us.
If you enjoyed this episode of The Missing Lessons, don't forget to follow the podcast, leave a rating, and share it with a friend. Your support helps us continue exploring the topics school never taught us.